January 18th, 1991, Fort Pierce, Florida. An 18-year-old kid drives the wrong way down a one-way street. A 29-year-old police sergeant pulls him over. A few minutes later, 13 gunshots echo through the night. One man drives away, the other never makes it home. And now, 35 years later, the state of Florida is preparing to carry out an execution scheduled for March 3rd, 2026. But here's the thing. This isn't just a cop killed in traffic stop story. It's about fear. It's about probation. It's about a childhood that defense lawyers say shaped everything. And it's about whether decades on death row changes how we think about justice. And trust me, this case takes turns you're not expecting. So if you appreciate deep dives that don't sugarcoat the uncomfortable stuff, do me a favor, hit that like button now, because the algorithm is ruthless, and if you don't like the video, it's basically telling YouTube you want more cat videos instead of real stories like this. I'm just saying. It was a normal patrol shift for Sergeant Danny Parrish. He spots a dark blue car going the wrong way down a one-way street. Not exactly a high-level crime, more like a "Sir, did you not see the sign?" situation. He pulls the driver over. Behind the wheel, Billy Leon Kearse, 18 years old. Parrish asks for his name. Kearse gives one, then another, then another. None of them match a driver's license, because he didn't have one. At that moment, this is just a traffic stop with a kid trying to lie his way out of trouble. But then Parrish asks him to step out of the car, and that's when everything spirals. Before the officer can get the cuffs on him, a struggle breaks out. It's quick, it's chaotic, and in the middle of that struggle, Kearse manages to grab Parrish's service weapon. 13 shots are fired. 9 strike Parrish's body, 4 hit his vest. Kearse jumps back into the car and drives away, leaving the officer on the pavement. A taxi driver nearby hears the gunfire, sees a dark blue car speed off. He later identifies the driver as a young black male. Parrish is rushed to the hospital. He doesn't survive. And just like that, a routine traffic stop becomes the kind of headline that freezes a community. But here's what most people didn't know that night. Kearse wasn't just afraid of a traffic ticket. He was on probation, and getting arrested again could have sent him right back to prison. But that wasn't even the full story. Before we go any further, let's talk about Danny Parrish, because he wasn't just a name in a court file. He was 29 years old, graduated high school in 1980, served 3 years in the U.S. Navy, was a member of the Florida National Guard, then worked his way into law enforcement full-time in 1988 after serving as a reserve officer. He wasn't some rookie. He was building a career. He was married. He had no children. His half-brother was also a police officer, and when he died, the entire community felt it. Flags flew at half-mast at the department. Governor Lawton Chiles attended the funeral. Fellow officers lined the streets. His widow, Mirtha, stood there at 25 years old, burying her husband. And that image, that sticks. Because no matter how complicated this story gets later, that moment is real. But while the town was grieving, police were already tracking down the man who ran, and they didn't have to look far. Kearse didn't disappear. The taxi driver's description helped, but the bigger mistake? He drove off in a car registered in his name. Police traced the plate, tracked the address, and arrested him shortly after. Here's where things get layered. Kearse had recently been released from prison. He'd been sentenced in 1990 to 4 years behind bars for burglary-related charges. He was now out on probation. So when Parrish pulled him over, it wasn't just about driving the wrong way. If he got arrested, probation violation, back to prison. Defense attorneys would later argue that panic took over, that fear of returning to incarceration triggered the fight. But prosecutors saw it differently. They saw a man who resisted arrest, grabbed an officer's weapon, and fired until the magazine was empty. And in Florida, killing a law enforcement officer changes everything. But as the case moved toward trial, another narrative began forming, one that focused on Kearse's childhood. And this is where things get uncomfortable. In court, the defense team didn't know the shooting. They focused on why. Teachers testified he often came to school hungry, poorly clothed, frequently absent. He ran away repeatedly as a kid, telling authorities he felt safer in detention than at home. There was testimony that his mother drank heavily during pregnancy. He suffered a head injury as a toddler. Psychologists later suggested possible brain damage, low intellectual functioning, severe emotional disturbance. By age 8, he already had contact with police, labeled beyond control. By 10, petty theft and burglary charges started stacking up, mostly non-violent property crimes. He was placed in special education programs for emotionally disturbed children, dropped out after 8th grade. Defense experts painted a picture of neglect, instability, and untreated mental issues. And here's where we have to be clear. Explaining is not excusing. Understanding someone's background doesn't erase what they did, but it does complicate the conversation. And that complexity hit the courtroom hard, because jurors now had two images in their heads, a fallen officer with a grieving widow and an 18-year-old who grew up in chaos. But when it came time to decide, the jury didn't hesitate.
October 22, 1991. Guilty of first-degree murder. No surprise there. Then came sentencing. Florida had recently enacted a statute allowing either death or life without parole for killing a law enforcement officer. The jury recommendation, 11-1 in favor of death. Parrish's widow supported it publicly. His sister and mother did too. The judge described the crime as heinous, atrocious, and cruel. And on November 8, 1991, Billy Kearse was sentenced to die in the electric chair at 19 years old. But here's the twist. It didn't stick. In 1993, Kearse appealed to the Florida Supreme Court, and in 1995, the court vacated his death sentence, not the conviction, just the sentence. They ordered a new sentencing hearing. Imagine being the victim's family and hearing that 4 years later, everything reopened. In 1996, a second jury heard the case. This time, unanimous recommendation for death. In 1997, he was officially resentenced. That back and forth created a legal saga that would stretch for decades. And if you think it ended there, oh no. From 1997 onward, Kearse remained on Florida's death row. Appeals in 2000, denied. Appeals in 2007, denied. Appeals in 2018, denied. By 2018, he was one of 12 death row inmates connected to murders on Florida's Treasure Coast. Over time, that number shrank. Meanwhile, the world outside changed completely. The internet exploded, social media took over, governors changed, laws evolved. But inside a cell, time moves differently. And here's the bigger question people debate quietly. When someone spends 30-plus years on death row, does that change how we view the sentence? Some argue it's justice delayed. Others argue decades of isolation is punishment in itself. But before that debate could settle, January 29, 2026 happened. And this is where things speed up. Governor Ron DeSantis signed the death warrant. Execution scheduled for March 3, 2026. Kearse became the third Florida inmate set for execution that year, 35 years after the shooting. And as expected, another appeal was filed in February 2026, arguing constitutional concerns. Whether that changes anything remains to be seen. But the reality? The clock is ticking, and this case forces a tough set of questions. Does childhood trauma mitigate ultimate responsibility? Does killing a police officer demand the harshest possible punishment? After 35 years, does execution feel like closure or something else? There's no easy answer, and anyone who tells you there is, they're oversimplifying it. Here's what we know. An officer pulled over a car for driving the wrong way.
Minutes later, he was gone. An 18-year-old made a decision in a moment of panic or rage or fear, and that decision defined the rest of his life. A widow buried her husband at 25. A community mourned, and a legal battle lasted longer than some of you watching this have been alive. This isn't a clean story. It's not a movie script. It's messy, and it leaves you thinking long after the video ends. So if you made it this far, first of all, respect. Second of all, hit the like button. Seriously, if you don't, YouTube assumes this story wasn't worth telling, and that's wild. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you doing? I drop deep dives like this all the time, and subscribing is free, literally free. The only thing it costs you is 2 seconds, and maybe the guilt of knowing you almost didn't support quality content. And comment below. Where do you stand on this? After 35 years, should the sentence move forward, or has time changed the equation? Let's talk about it, because stories like this, they don't end in the courtroom. They continue in the conversations we're willing to have. I'll see you in the next one.